Has been noted, and I call the honourable member for Indi.
Good evening, Deputy Speaker. I rise tonight in this grievance debate to call on the government to put an end to the silo approach and to work across portfolio boundaries to lift the burden from the shoulders of regional students. I was inspired and moved by the 75 young people who came to my budget feedback sessions and the 65 other young people who wrote to me. They work hard to finish their education, despite the challenges they face. But the systemic drag puts them behind their metropolitan counterparts and stops them from reaching their full potential. As their independent representative, I am determined their voice be heard in this parliament. Higher education for regional communities is not a single issue. There are multiple challenges across portfolios, and a multi-pronged approach is the only way to find a solution. Deputy Speaker, tonight I want to address three elements of this grievance: the need to increase the representation of regional students in higher education, the need to provide greater support for those transitioning between secondary and tertiary education, particularly when this includes a move from home to the city, and the need to ensure there is recognition of the workforce and economic development requirements of the community when we are addressing higher education. We know there is a gap between metropolitan regional communities and attending universities. Young people aged 15 to 24 years from rural and regional Australia are almost half as likely to be attending university as young people from metropolitan areas. Half as likely. And this is not a new challenge. In 2008, the Australian Review of Higher Education drove home the report. People from regional Australia remain seriously underrepresented in higher education, even with rural universities, vet programs and public facilities in rural centres. A 2003 report from the then Department of Education, Science and Training told us around 40% of regional students had moved to attend university, while only 4% of the metropolitan counterparts moved. Online study is often presented as an option for regional students wanting or needing to stay at home, but also wanting to continue their education. And while I believe, and I was very amused by the comments from my colleague from Maranoa, I believe that the NBN ads that we've just been seeing on TV, the NBN tells us that knowledge isn't limited by space and time, that anyone can change the world from anywhere, and it's easy to pass on these skills. My experience, if there's no internet connection, then simply it's not an option. If you are one of the 880 people aged between 15 and 24 who live, for example, in Mansfield, moving from university does not come as a surprise. Depending on which side of the town you live, there's only a 6-kilometre difference between travelling to either Melbourne or Albury. And it's a similar story for those living in smaller communities across my whole community. You have to move. And while regional universities are part of the solution, they are not the whole solution. Movement is not always related to a lack of a regional campus or course availability. Young people see their pursuit of study in a city area as an opportunity to grow up, to assert their independence, to meet new and exciting people, and have experiences that are simply not available at home. But travelling to a city comes with its challenges. It's difficult to find jobs and build experience, and they cannot access an independent payment rate with Centrelink while they study. And the 2017 budget increase to university fees adds to their financial stress. But according to Universities Australia, the biggest barriers for students are often related to issues beyond university. They cite pressures with health or stress, juggling work-life balance, the need to do paid work, and the overall workload, as well as financial difficulties. A report from Education Training Out West tells us students from rural and regional communities need more support during the transition phase from high school to university, and with the most critical period being between December to March. The biggest threat to the sustainability of rural communities is a declining population of young people. And while we want to encourage increasing numbers of students from regional areas to attend university in the city, the statistics show us that they are unlikely to return in a hurry. So for me, the challenge is to bring them home. Young people in my electorate work hard to build their future. They take up the challenges of moving away from home to study, and many hope to return to Indi once their studies are completed and bring back the experience and skills that will enhance growth and vibrancy in our rural and regional communities. So to encourage this, I want our young people to come home. I want them to bring their skills and their vibrancy with us. But we need to give them and ensure them that there's an opportunity in their home communities. For this to occur, we absolutely need people to connect. For those driving economic development, to work with those developing workforce plans. And when these are driven by government policy, we need government agencies to be talking to each other. And to its credit, the government recognises there is a problem, and now I believe they have the opportunity to act. On March 2nd, 2017, the Minister for Education and Training, Senator Simon Birmingham, announced the appointment of Emeritus Professor John Helsley to lead an independent review into rural, regional and remote education. The review will foster the educational outcomes of regional, rural and remote students. It will provide recommendations to government on innovation and fresh approaches to support improved access and the achievement of these students in schools and their transition to further study, training and employment. Good move. And on March 15th this year, the government announced the Regional Ministerial Task Force, spearheaded by the Prime Minister, with no less than 8 Cabinet Ministers representing health, education, employment, regional development, infrastructure, transport, resources, innovation, industry and science. And this task force will focus on closing the gap between the city and the bush. And following the task force establishment, Minister Nash was quoted as saying, and I quote, "I think the comparison is pretty clear. A lot of our city students have an opportunity when they're living in a metropolitan area to live at home and attend university. A lot of our regional students don't. So they'll be the types of things we'll be discussing. I wish that task force well." Rural communities know better than most the importance of connection. They know that education, health, employment have to be addressed together, not in silos. And I call on the government to implement these initiatives with the same thought processes that rural communities approach when we're looking at our own community. We ask ourselves, are there barriers keeping people away? Social, financial, geographical, economic? And does it include future needs? And in answering these questions, I want to take this opportunity tonight to remind the government of another review that they have commissioned. In 2016, the government commissioned an independent review to examine the effectiveness of Regional Development Australia, known as RDA, in delivering the Australian government's regional agenda. This review would make recommendations regarding its future scope, structure and delivery model in light of developments in the Australian government's regional agenda. And I understand that Mr Smith has provided his final report to the Minister for Regional Development, and the Australian government is seeking advice on the recommendations. We're very keen to hear the result, Minister. In Victoria, RDA committees comprise local leaders with broad and diverse skills and experience, as well as demonstrated networks within their region. They understand the challenges, opportunities and priorities with their own communities. So the RDA review and RDA committees are really important for us. And my call on the government tonight is to join the dots, not to act in silos. And I say to the government, you have an independent review into regional, rural and remote education designed to support students to succeed in school and in their transition to further study, training and employment. You have committed $15.2 million in this year's budget to create 6 new community-owned study hubs and expand support for work experience. You've committed $220 million to the Regional Jobs and Investment Package to help the regions. You have a program designed to build partnerships to ensure integrated and aligned arrangements for regional engagement and economic development. You've established this Regional Ministerial Task Force to improve the lives of rural and regional and remote Australians. So I say to the government, bring it together. Don't let these initiatives continue to defeat silos. The Regional Ministerial Task Force must bring these initiatives together. And in bringing my comments to a close, if the task force could do this, We all believe that in rural and regional Australia, students, the future of our nation, will be able to get the education they deserve to meet the needs of our community. This is an urgent cry.
The question is that grievances be noted.